1,000,000%. I 1,000,000% believe that the Dayton Flyers are afraid of the Wright State Raiders. That's why they come up with every excuse in the book not to play them.
There it is. The hottest take of them all. It's the Justin Kinner Show, presented by Frickers, live on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, everybody, we welcome you in here on a Friday. The Justin Kinner Show, presented by Frickers. Happy Friday. A ton to get into. High school football season is officially here. That's right. I know Friday Night Lights, a lot going on tonight, but we kicked off the 2025 high school football season last night with an instant classic. The Battle of Kettering, it was truly a battle, and it was one of our favorite games that we've called here on 1410 ESPN Radio. How about the Alter Knights? 28-21, the final last night. Thought that game was 1,000,000% going to overtime. And it was very reminiscent of the Texas-Ohio State game. Remember the Scoop and Sawyer play? That's exactly what happened last night. It was the Scoop and Sawyer play that secured the win for the Buckeyes over Texas to punch their ticket to the national championship. Well, Alter's not in any championship, but what they did do is they ended their losing streak against Fairmont in the Battle of Kettering. They had lost 4 straight up until last night. 28-21 the final. I tell you what, the scoop and score, the finish, the crowd, the energy, the weather was just phenomenal. I mean, it was raining, it was cloudy, it was a little windy, it was a little chilly. Everything you want for a high school football game. Last night was phenomenal. I just thought that was such a cool way to kick it off. Both teams debuted new quarterbacks last night. J.J. Hill for Fairmont, Rod Owens Jr. For the Alter Knights. Rod Owens Jr., love watching that kid play. He had himself a night, okay? The quarterback for the Knights. They have a lot of weapons. Drew Cripps, again, an unbelievable wide receiver, of course. You look at the fact that when it comes to, the rushing game, the running game for Alter, between Noah Jones and Rod Owens Jr., the quarterback, I mean, they ran all over Fairmont's defense last night. The Alter Knights, and Fairmont's defense is good, but Alter last night rushed for 265 yards. Rod Owens Jr., the quarterback, ran the ball 16 times for 137 yards, and he punched the ball into the end zone twice. All right, including his long of the night was a 54-yard run. I mean, absolutely killed it. So it was a pleasure to watch him play last night. And, week 1, that's when you're kind of feeling things out. If that's the worst that Alter looks the rest of the way, this is a team that got to the regional final last year. I think they started 3-5, and they ended up finishing 8-6 or whatever on the season because they just went on a tear, especially into the playoffs. But they're starting out hot. Rod Owens Jr., love watching that kid play last night. Quarterback completed 7 of his 10 passes, 72 yards and a touchdown. 3 total touchdowns on the night. Unbelievable performance. I think Alter is going to be special this year. I mean, that was pretty fun watching them. Last night, no doubt about it. Fairmont, nothing to, they're going to be just fine. They got Trotwood coming up next week. Josh Copeland and Adam Campbell will have the call for that one right here on 1410 ESPN Radio. Looking forward to that. But I tell you what, J.J. Hill, their quarterback, Fairmont's not really known to pass the ball. I mean, that's why I joke all the time. Kinner, why do you guys call so many Fairmont games? Because they run the ball a lot, and we're home at a decent time. Plus, they're just down the street. But no, we pick Fairmont games because they're a hell of a program. They're a heck of a team, and they've been so consistent throughout the Dave Miller era. But they haven't been a team that's known to throw the ball a lot. And last night, J.J. Hill, first-year quarterback for Fairmont, he dropped back 4 times. Now, you're probably laughing. It's like 4 times. That's not a lot. It is for Fairmont. I mean, it is for Fairmont. I mean, J.J. Hill dropped back 4 times last night, threw for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns. The problem is late in the game, it was tied 21-all. J.J. Hill dropped back to pass and, of course, steps up in the pocket as it collapses, and he loses the ball, and that led to the Scoop and Sawyer play for Alter to go on to win. But, if you can't tell, I was super jacked about last night. But Alter, they're going to play deep in the high school football season, and Fairmont's going to be just fine as well. Talked about J.J. Hill, his performance last night at quarterback. Logan Doty, 16 carries, 93 yards. Didn't score a touchdown. It's a kid that had 25 touchdowns last year. Alter's defense was able to keep him out of the end zone. Not bad. Logan Doty, again, he's their workhorse. He rushed for just under 1,200 yards last year, 25 touchdowns. The senior running back. Every team that goes up against Fairmont's going to get a heavy dose of that kid. And Alter did last night, but they did a good job keeping him out of the end zone. no doubt about it. So again, we will have a lot of big games tonight, high school football action across the Miami Valley, but we will not be on the air tonight. That was our only Thursday game. We'll be every Friday night moving forward. If you want to go to the website, wingam.com, to check out the schedule, to find out where we're going to be each and every week, you could do so, wingam.com. Again, we will be live back at Fairmont next Friday night as they take on Trotwood. All right, we got a lot to get into here today. We are, of course, going to jump into the big story out of college football yesterday. Everyone loves beating up on the SEC. Everyone loves taking shots at the SEC because they schedule light, apparently. The only 8 conference games, while the Big Ten plays 9 conference games. And apparently when Ohio State is playing Rutgers while Alabama's playing Mercer, apparently the Alabama just has so much more of an advantage because our bad team is better than your bad team, and yada, 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 whatever. I always get tired of everyone constantly whining and crying about the SEC. I'm not an SEC fan or hater. I enjoy good football. And the SEC is some of the best football out there, if not the best football. I think it's the most, entertaining football. I think that the ratings and everything shows that. I mean, we could sit here and talk about, well, what have they done that Rutgers and some of these others haven't? Put Rutgers on TV, no one cares. Put Ole Miss on TV, more people care. It is what it is. There's no bias, all right? There's no bias. I mean, I know the Big Ten's won. Technically, they won back-to-back national championships. Only one of those was clean, though. So, this year, a lot on the line. Ohio State looking to do something that hasn't been done in decades, and that's repeat as national champions. But we'll get into all of that coming up here in just a few moments. Again, I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun food, sports, and spirits, of course. No high school football tonight because we did it last night. We highlighted that 28-21, the final. Altart finally gets a win over Fairmont. That puts an end to their 4-game losing streak in that rivalry. The Cincinnati Reds are a half game out of a playoff spot, and they're going to have a big one later on tonight. Late tonight, 9:40, the first pitch as they take on the Diamondbacks as their West Coast trip continues. Their West Coast trip started this past Monday night in Game 1 against the Angels. Now they have the Diamondbacks tonight, and then, of course, they'll remain on the West Coast after this Diamondback series as they'll start a 3-game series with the Los Angeles Dodgers this coming up Monday. So a lot of big series coming up for the Reds. The Mets continue to free fall, which keeps that door open. Every time the Reds get within a game, a half game, an opportunity to not clinch. You're not clinching anything, but to secure that final wild card spot, to now start changing your focus to chasing, to now retaining. I do wonder that mindset, how much that would change for the Reds. I think with this young ball club, with select veterans that they've sprinkled across the roster, they seem like they're built to be able to handle the chase. Whenever you're out of the playoffs, you're playing with house money. You're pursuing that final playoff spot. But what happens if the Reds do secure, like if they win tonight and the Mets lose and the Reds are holding on to that final wild card spot? What I'm curious about is how does that team respond to now going from pursuing and chasing a playoff spot to now having to hold teams off, to fend the Mets off, to keep the Diamondbacks who are behind them from getting hot, to keep the Cardinals who are a few games back from them from getting hot. They're going to have their opportunities. You're going to play the Mets in a 3-game series here in a few weeks. You're going to play the Padres, who are technically ahead of you. You're going to play the Cardinals. You have 2 series with the Cardinals coming up. So the bottom line is you're going to be playing teams like the Cubs. You're going to be playing the Pirates. You close out the regular season starting on September 27th. So just a hair over a month from now is when the season comes to a close. I'm very curious to see if that pressure of, okay, we're chasing a playoff spot. We lose. We're not out anything. We weren't even holding on to a playoff spot. But once they officially get there, once they are like when we find, I could see it now. I could see Chatterbox's graphics when they put them out. I could see, the Cincinnati Reds. I could see everybody getting excited. The Reds are holding on to a playoff spot here in late August, heading into September. Does that mess with the psyche? Does that mess with the mentality of this young team? A team that really has not had any experience when it comes to the postseason. The last time they came close to the postseason was when they made it in 2020. And as you guys know, not hating, I don't count it. I didn't count it. I don't count anything from that season for Major League Baseball. And hell, the Reds even had a Cy Young winning pitcher, their first in franchise history and only. But, it was a shortened, truncated 60-game season, and the Reds only played 2 more additional games in the postseason and could barely score a run and got ousted early. So this is all new ground for a lot of these young players. And I'm just fascinated to see, it's one thing when you're constantly chasing. You're constantly, keeping an eye on what the Mets are doing. You're still going to be keeping an eye on what those teams are doing if you win tonight and get a hold of that final playoff spot. But when you're a young team, and Terry Francona, who's a seasoned veteran, of course, a Hall of Famer, he's been through these trials before. He's been through all these ups and downs, the roller coaster seasons before. But at some point, as the season, shrinks, we have 4 weeks left, 3 weeks left, 2 weeks left. As those weeks start to shrink and the moments become bigger and the lights become brighter, do these young stars become tighter? Do we start to see them, kind of go into a shell a little bit? Do we start to see Elly De La Cruz press more and start to kind of go in a little bit of a funk, right? Like Hunter Green, who pitched phenomenal last year down the stretch, and he's been phenomenal since coming off the IL. But, he's never had to pitch in these high leverage situations. It's, he just has to go out there and be the best pitcher on a non-playoff team. But now when your team, if they're a half game out right now, if they get that final spot, does the psyche change? Does the mentality change? That's what I'm curious about when it's all said and done. And that's what I'm going to be keeping an eye on. But, can't get ahead of ourselves. They've been within a half game on a few occasions, and they haven't been able to close the deal. They haven't been able to capitalize on these opportunities. The Mets have been free falling. And it's like when the Reds win, the Mets win. When the Reds lose, the Mets, it's just the Reds have never been able to truly climb over that hump completely, and they're going to have a chance to do it tonight. Let me see who the Mets have. I'm trying to see so they have the Braves coming up later on tonight. That's a 7:15. Yeah, because if the Mets at the Braves tonight, that's a 7:15 game. The Reds don't even play until 2 hours and some change later. We'll know by the time that game starts, whether or not the Reds have a chance to jump into that final playoff spot or not. So I'm fascinated by this as we head into the weekend. I'm going to be keeping an eye on that. Meaningful Reds baseball as we sit here in the month of August. I love it. Keeping an eye on the Mets, what they're doing, at 7:15 tonight when that game starts. I'm going to be locked into that Braves and Mets game because if the Mets lose and the Reds win tonight, the Reds jump the Mets and sit in that final playoff spot, which is wild. You don't win. You're not putting a banner up for that. There's going to be no parade in the city for that by any means. But as we sit here and follow along to, be talking about, heading into next week, week 1, college football, Ohio State, Texas, we're going to be spending a ton of time on that, right? The NFL season officially is 2 weeks from Sunday is when it all gets started. Bengals, Browns, week 1. We're getting closer to that. That's where I want to turn my attention towards. And the Reds are saying, don't forget about us. Don't forget we talked about the Battle of Kettering today. I mean, there's so many other things to keep our, to keep our focus on. We've usually checked out on the Reds by this point. And here we have a big, meaningful series heading into the weekend, and we're keeping an eye on other teams in that playoff picture as well to see how it impacts the Reds. I love it. I love it. The Justin Kinner Show, Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM, Dayton's radio home for Reds baseball. As I mentioned, the Cincinnati Reds will be in action coming up later on tonight. It's a late one, 9:40 the first pitch with 9:10 pregame coverage beginning right here on 1410 Wing AM. Lytle going to be on the mound for the Reds, one of their trade deadline acquisitions. Game 2, Andrew Abbott will take the mound, and then on Sunday, Brady Singer will take the mound with the 4:10 first pitch start time as they look to go for that Diamondback series before they return, before they head to Los Angeles to take on the Dodgers. All right, let's switch over to college football now. SEC. The SEC is now going to play 9 conference games. How does that impact college football? How does that impact the Big Ten? We'll get to all of that. Are you guys happy now? Are you fans happy now that the SEC finally changed their approach to scheduling? We'll discuss that when we come back. All right, and we are back. It's the Justin Kinner Show, presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. 937-518-1410. That's the number that you can call and jump in on the conversation. We've got a few texts already that have come in. A couple of you didn't like my take about the Cincinnati Reds in the playoffs, about me sitting there saying, worried about if the Reds do get into that final playoff spot, how it can mess up the flow of the team. Look, don't be so dramatic. But one person saying that, just because if they do take over a playoff spot, they haven't won anything. I'm very well aware of that. I know. Relax. But like I said before, it's one thing when the Reds for years have been this close. 2 years ago, they missed the playoffs by 2 games. The Diamondbacks, they missed the playoffs by 2 games. The Diamondbacks get that final wild card spot, and they end up making it all the way to the World Series. The Reds have always been on the cusp. They haven't, less than a handful of playoff appearances in the last 3 decades. This team, it's almost a successful season if they come close to making the playoffs. And that's kind of what I feel like is happening right now. I think it's going to be a complete failure if the Reds miss the playoffs this year, because they've been hovering around. They haven't been, the fact that so many teams around them, have plummeted. And the fact that so many teams around them have opened the door. The Atlanta Braves were not supposed to be this bad this year. Right? They were not supposed to be, that bad this year. The Mets are supposed to be, they financially spent to the point to where they should not be experiencing this right now. The fact that they are, they've lost back-to-back now, but they've 4-6 in their last 10. At one point, they had lost 7 straight. Financially, they were constructed to not be doing what they're doing. The Padres financially have been constructed to not do what they've done. Now, they've won 3 straight. They're 6-4 in their last 10. All of that. The Cubs, 73-55. That's about what we expected. But, the Braves are not supposed to be this bad. The Giants were not supposed to be, 6 games under 500. The Diamondbacks were not supposed to be 4 games under 500. So there's a lot of things that are happening right now that are, in essence, favoring the Reds, and yet they still haven't been able to capitalize on it. So tonight, when the Mets play the Braves at 7:15, by the time that game's wrapping up, we'll have a good indication of whether the Reds are going to be in jump into that final playoff spot or not. So my point is that I think that the Reds, what I am concerned about is when they have just for years been the team that's always just chugging along and pursuing it and in the mix, semi-competitive, little over, a little below 500. That's been the Reds for a while. What happens though when they finally do jump into that final playoff spot? And now they're not pursuing the playoffs. Now they're trying to fend off teams around them. That changes the pressure a little bit. It's a different kind of pressure, and a young and inexperienced team. You just have to wonder how much of that impacts a team like this team. But we'll see. Look, I just want this team to win tonight. I'm tired of seeing them a half game out. We've seen them for months now, 2.5 out, 1.5 games out, 1 game out, a half game out. I'm tired of them getting a half game out, losing, back to a game. But it's okay. The Reds are a game out of a playoff spot. And then they'll drop to 2 games back, and then they'll get hot, and then they'll jump to 1 game back, and then we get excited. And, oh, man, they're a half game back. Look out. I'm tired of that. No more. The Reds need to capitalize tonight and take advantage of this opportunity that's been presented to them, no doubt about it. All right. I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show, presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. Let's get into this. The SEC will implement a 9-game conference schedule beginning with the 2026 season. Commissioner Greg Sankey says that the long-awaited change protects rivalries, increases competitive balance, and ensures SEC teams are well prepared to compete and succeed. Now, that's just a bunch of PR mumbo-jumbo. I think that Greg Sankey knows that the SEC, just even if you eliminate non-conference games, playing in the SEC, trust me, you're more than prepared for the competition come playoff time. But again, this is all bells and whistles. This is all just, him saying the right things just to appease y'all, but is what it is. As we sit here right now, I'm fascinated by this because so much was made a few weeks ago. I defended Indiana on this, by the way. I defended Indiana on this. Kurt Signetti, at Big Ten Media Days, brought up the fact that, he was taking Virginia off his schedule. They were taking a lot of, Power 4, Power 5 teams off the schedule and putting non-Power 4 teams on there. Their schedule is just absolutely horrendous, non-conference wise, moving forward. And well, everyone is ripping Indiana for that and saying how, they're a bunch of cowards for going that route. I said, well, I kind of don't blame them. Their non-conference slate this year, Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, Indiana State. I don't blame them for being a little loose with that schedule. Indiana already, if I was to tell you, like, if you're saying Indiana's schedule's bad, but this is a team that has to go play at Iowa, you're playing top 25 Illinois this year. You're playing at number 7 Oregon. All right, you're playing at number 2 Penn State. How are we going to sit here and tell Indiana that that's a bad schedule? That's a tough schedule if you're Indiana. So why would a team like Indiana make it harder? I don't get why we're so obsessed with this. I think we all deep down understand it. There's a business side to this. A lot of the people that hate on this are the same ones that say, well, I hate when players sit out of practices and stuff, but that's the business side of this. But yet you can't see the business decision that Indiana has made right here. This makes all the sense in the world. I'm not a big Hoosier fan. I don't really care. But it makes sense. If Ohio State came out and said they were never going to play tough non-conference opponents again moving forward, I would say, yeah, I get it. Oh, but Justin, I bet you can't wait for that Texas game coming. No, I can't. It's going to be exciting. But I also know it's good business for Ohio State to make sure that they minimize the potholes, right? Like, you need to minimize the amount of times that you could potentially stub your toe. So as I sit here right now, everyone made such a big deal about Kurt Signetti basically saying, hey, yeah, we're not playing anybody of substance. We basically have that SEC schedule. And he wasn't wrong. The SEC, they play 3 horrible teams per season. But to the SEC's credit, though, they always do challenge themselves. People don't want to get, the fact, LSU will play Clemson, right? LSU, will play Notre Dame. Georgia will play Notre Dame. Texas is going to play Ohio State. Alabama's going to play Ohio State. Georgia's going to play Ohio State. Like, the SEC challenges themselves. Let's not act like they're, we're going to take the 3 bad teams they play and act like that's what the SEC does. To their credit, they've always challenged themselves in the non-con. But if you guys think that the SEC going to 9 conference games is going to appease you, it's not. If anything, it's just going to motivate them to schedule even lighter in the non-con moving forward. For those of you out there who think that this is a win, you're going to get even more upset because all that this is going to do is force SEC teams to say, well, now, like, if you're Alabama and there's the 3 guarantee, I don't know what 3 guarantees, so that every team is going to have 3 guaranteed teams that they play every year, and they're finalizing that now. But if you are going to play 9 SEC teams every year, why would you add an even tougher one in the 3-game non-conference slate? Because that's next. I'm curious if Alabama keeps Ohio State. If Alabama has to play Tennessee and Georgia every single season, why would you keep that Ohio State game on the schedule in a few years? And I don't blame them. I wouldn't blame them. Ohio State's not going to play Penn State for a few years after this, which is wild, but they're going to play Oregon and they're going to play USC and they're going to play Michigan. And if you're going to play Oregon, USC, and Michigan every year, why would you add Alabama to that mix? As a fan, I love it. But again, this isn't new. We've all had this discussion before. We get it. But you guys are so not jealous. I don't think anyone's jealous of the SEC. What you are is you're just fatigued of hearing about how great the SEC is. But I don't know why you're fatigued of it, because we know how great the SEC is. I don't know why you guys want to die on that hill. If you look at the Big Ten, the Big Ten's better than the SEC. I don't know if it is. Penn State is known for, this is a big year for the Big Ten. If Penn State actually wins a national championship, that is massive for the Big Ten. It's massive for James Franklin and Penn State. But think about it. If James Franklin, who has the same blueprint right now going for him that was the one that led Michigan to a national championship outside of their cheating ways, of course, it's the same blueprint that led Ohio State to their national championship a year ago. A lot of returning and a lot of talented NFL players that turned down the draft to come back, seasoned veteran roster, NFL quarterback, right? Like, the Penn State has everything you need to go win a national championship. Imagine if they don't. Imagine if they fail. Imagine if they get knocked out early in the playoff. Imagine if they don't make the playoff. Imagine if they don't even get to the Big Ten championship game. That's a stain on the Big Ten. That's a bad look for the Big Ten because Penn State is just synonymous with underachieving. USC is one of the biggest, most overrated programs in all of college football right now. Right? Like Michigan, now luckily they've almost basically made it out of this whole cheating scandal unscathed, but they're recruiting very, very well, but we got to see the results on the field. Can they get this? Can Moore get them back to where they were with Harbaugh consistently? I don't know. But let's not, and even then, Michigan won that one national championship, but Michigan was a program that was synonymous with underachieving. Penn State is a program synonymous with underachieving. USC is a program synonymous with underachieving. And hell, even Oregon. How many times in the Big 12 did Oregon have the opportunity of a lifetime, or the Pac-12 or whatever? Did Oregon have the opportunity of a lifetime to come out of that weak conference? They never made the 14 playoff. I mean, they did like back in 14, but what I mean, like over the last couple of years of the 14 playoff when the Pac-12 was weak, they never capitalized on it. They underachieved. The best teams in the Big Ten constantly underachieve. LSU wins a national championship once per decade. Georgia is in the midst of a dynasty run. Alabama, obviously not without Nick Saban right now, but you sit back, you look at them, and I do think, recruiting, everything is still rolling. Alabama's still Alabama until we see otherwise. Texas is a favorite to win a national championship. We need to stop. We need to stop being so hateful towards the SEC and just not give them their flowers, but stop hating on them constantly. The SEC is better than the Big Ten. The SEC is deeper. They have more national championship contenders. You have South Carolina, who's going to be very, very good this year, and that's like a USC pro. It's not like a USC program because USC is more storied. I get that, but what I mean is that's a program that every year we're told how good they're going to be, and then they fall flat. But I'm fascinated by what's going to happen this year. You have Oklahoma, you have Texas, you have Florida, you have LSU, you have Georgia, you have Alabama. Let's not act like it's the same thing as Nebraska, in Purdue, in Michigan State, in Maryland. It's not the same. It's not the same. I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show, Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM, 937-518-1410. That's the number to call and jump in on the conversation. You could text, what have you, but get in on the conversation with this. We'll pick up with this when we come back. Again, the Justin Kinner Show, Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM.
1410 Wing AM.
All right, it is the Justin Kinner Show here on a Friday. Hope everybody has some fun plans lined up for the weekend. I know a lot of you are making plans for the night to go out to a lot of high school football games. There's a ton of big high school football games tonight. The one I'm looking forward to, one of the ones I'm looking forward to the most, Lakota East going to be at Centerville tonight. I'm keeping my eye on Centerville. Looking forward to when we get to call one of their games on the schedule this year. Look, they went to the state semifinal last year, and I think it was like the third time in school history. But look, they do return a ton of key weapons from last season. Shane Cole, the quarterback. Of course, they have their star running back in Parker Johnson, who I feel like we've been calling that name for a long time. But they look to keep it rolling. To keep in mind too, and I kind of forgot about this until prepping for this week for these games, but Centerville, Brent Ulrey was there for a minute. He was there for a while, but longtime assistant, former Vandalia Butler coach John Puckett takes over, or had taken over for Brent Ulrey. So John Puckett going to make his coaching debut with the Elks coming up here later on tonight. So I'm looking forward to that. One thing I noticed last night in Kettering, and obviously everyone always has opinions. We talk so much about the college football playoff format. We always talk about the playoff formats in some capacity, right? People are still salty about the constant changes to the playoff structure for OHSA, for high school football in the state of Ohio. And there was a big survey that was sent out statewide to coaches, athletic directors, and the schools. And to the OHSA's credit, because a lot of people like to bury and pile on the OHSA, and I'm not saying that that they make every right decision. I was not a fan. I did not like the expansion to 7 divisions. I didn't mind the expansion to 7 divisions. What I did not like was how it impacted the student athletes. Whenever a good friend of mine, shout out to Michelle Mimna, by the way, the fact that, she was able to coach her team to their very first ever state volleyball championship weekend, and they didn't complain about it. But I thought it was kind of wrong that a school gets to a state tournament for the first time and they have to go to Vandalia Butler High School to play a state tournament game. No one grows up dreaming of Vandalia Butler High School to compete for a state championship. That's not how this is supposed to work. But that's just kind of how this has been going down, and I just haven't been a fan of that, some of the changes. So I don't always take the OHSA side, despite the fact that I work closely with them for a lot of the state championships, especially basketball here in Dayton. But they, to their credit, they put out that survey. They saw that a lot of people did not like how many high school teams or how many teams were making the high school playoffs for football, and they made some drastic changes. Last year, the field was 16 teams per region. It's shrinking from 16 teams to 12 teams, with the top 4 receiving byes in the first round. Additionally, the first 3 rounds will be hosted by the higher seed instead of just the first 2. So it's going to be way more difficult to make the postseason. I've always thought it was ridiculous to have teams below 500 in the playoffs. You guys, I'm not joking. There would be two-win teams making the playoffs because certain regions were so weak, and I just think that is wrong. I remember for me growing up, when your team made the playoffs, that was like it's kind of like March Madness a little bit, where if you just make the NCAA tournament, you're putting a banner up, right? That's how and I think that's special. It's something that's hard to do. And when you do clinch that spot, it is so memorable and so special. And I think that matters. How many of you listening would go back to your 10, 20, 30, 40-year reunion and talk about, oh yeah, that's, it's Mike. He's part of the playoff team in 19, whatever, right? Like that mattered. But when everyone makes it, oh yeah, that's Steve. He's part of that 2022 such and such high school playoff team that won 2 games. Oh yeah, the memories, man, memories. You just, it doesn't work that way. I think that it should be difficult to make the postseason. You should have to really grind to make it. Good teams shouldn't miss it. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean like we should be talking about controversial teams who miss the playoffs versus 2-win teams that make the playoffs. I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio. But again, 4 years of 16-team playoffs. I mean, it was just every year, and there was no challenges. There was no competitive games in the early going. And what ended up happening is you're taking some of the worst teams and going up against the higher seeds, lower seeds, and they're just getting their doors blown off, and it just leads to a not so safe situation either. So they could miss me. I'm glad that the OHSA went with that too long. If you guys remember back in 2020, in 2020, all teams made the playoffs as changes were made due to, remember, like the COVID pandemic and everything. The state increased the playoff field to 16 teams in 2021. So everyone made it in 20. They increased the field to 16 teams starting in 2021, and it's been like that ever since. But this season's going to be different. It's going to be a 12 playoff teams per region. and that's a significant drop. And I think that's how it should be. I want it to be difficult. I want to see more competitive playoff games, and I want it to be difficult to make the playoffs so that when you do clinch a playoff spot, that it was something that was earned as far as that's concerned, and not just, hey, we need someone to fill out this region, this bracket. Can you jump in there as far as that goes? But nonetheless. All right. I'm Justin Kinner, the Justin Kinner Show, presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. And by the way, if you disagree, do you think it's wrong? Do you disagree with the OHSA deciding to drop the amount of playoff teams from 16 to 12 per region? Should it have stayed at 16? Do you disagree with me? Should it have been a thing where more schools get an opportunity to compete in the postseason, more student athletes get an opportunity to experience that? But I mean, I get it. I'm not saying, but like at the same time, I do think that when you do experience that when you've earned that, I think that should matter. But it is what it is. I don't have kids, so I can't relate to that the way some of you can. You're going to look at it from a completely different angle, and I completely get that, and I respect the heck out of that. No doubt about it. All right. College basketball. How about this? The Dayton Flyers revealed their entire non-conference schedule. Take a look at that. For those who are watching live on the Justin Kinner Show Facebook page, there's the non-conference schedule right there. I tell you what, everyone thinks, all Kinner does is bash, bury Dayton. This is probably one of the best non-conference schedules I've seen Dayton put together in quite some time. They're going to open up the season against Penn State. Now that's in that charity exhibition game. That's going to be on October 19th. Which is crazy because basketball is not too far off in the distance. College basketball is going to be here before you know it, which is crazy. Penn State will be playing at UD Arena, just like Ohio State has done. We saw Xavier last year. They've been able to get some cool opponents to come play in this charity exhibition game. And the bigger schools, because it's an exhibition game, they're not afraid to come do it because it doesn't count towards anything, and they could play their backups. And if they lose, it's because they played their backups and all that type of thing, but it is what it is. But I look at this. I love the fact that, Florida State is going to be coming to UD Arena this year. Florida State at UD Arena. They got Liberty coming, North Florida. Look, so you can make whatever jokes you want about Bethune-Cookman and this, that, and the other. But as far as the competitive schedule is concerned, UD going to Marquette. They're going to be playing at Cincinnati. You're going to be playing Georgetown, BYU, Miami, the Hurricanes, from Florida. So I think this is a very competitive non-conference schedule. The thing is, and I've talked to a lot of Flyer fans who are very accustomed to feeling that connection with the program because, when these guys come in as freshmen, you get to be a part of their journey. You get to watch them come up through the program, and you're a part of that. There's not a whole lot of familiar names on this Dayton Flyers roster. And Dayton's the type of program that's probably impacted by this more than anything because they have such a large and passionate fan base. When you are a smaller program that doesn't have a huge fan following, a lot of times those fans are constantly re-upping on the roster every year anyways. They're kind of not used to it, but it's just they're not as connected. I've talked to so many Flyer fans who have talked about the frustration of they just don't feel as in touch with the program because of the constant player movement. Deron Holmes coming up through the program, you got to be a part of that journey with them. And that's why when he came back and he did his appearance at Lee's. And I talked to the guys at Lee's. I talked to Deron, and he said he loves coming back here, walking in and just to see a Flyer fans welcoming in. That matters because, for one, yes, he's an NBA player that represents UD very, very well. I'm a big Deron player fan. I'm a Deron fan across the board. But you guys felt that connection with him because you watched him come in as a freshman. You watched him develop into the superstar that he was, and you watched him go on to be drafted. There's not a lot of players on this Dayton roster that you feel like you're a part of their journey anymore. The transfer, and this isn't just a Dayton program, it's so many programs. But that has been interesting sitting back and talking to a lot of Flyer fans who say their passion and fandom for the Flyers, it runs deep, but they have noticed that they're sensing that lack of connection with the program because the player turnover. And that's not a Dayton problem. That's college basketball as a whole right now. It's unfortunate. But when you're constantly losing players and you don't get to be a part of their journey coming up, Obi Toppin coming in wasn't highly recruited. comes in, he red shirts, then he bursts onto the, we hear about all, man, I tell you, this Obi kid, he's lighting it up in practice. You guys are going to be in for something. And then he, puts on a hell of a show, and then he comes back and he's part of that 2020 team that goes on to, would have been a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Like, you felt connected to him. You felt connected to Jalen Crutcher. You felt connected to, to the Scoochie Smith and the Kendall Pollard classes from a decade ago. Like, you were a part of their journey. There's no one on this roster right now for Dayton that you feel a part of their journey. And I think that's a lot of programs are experiencing that across the board. That's unfortunate. You're still going to keep your season tickets. You're going to go to every game, 13,000 fans. I'm not taking a shot at Dayton. I've just found it interesting. The more Flyer fans I've talked to about this have all said the same thing. They love their Flyers, but there's just a disconnect right now that's happening. And don't let me speak for all of you, but I've talked to a good amount of Flyer fans that have all independently said the same thing. They're missing something. That connection just doesn't seem to be there as much as what it used to be. And I know what it is. It's that you had a connection with the program. Yes. But also it was more special. Like, think back to that Archie, those tournament runs. You watch Scoochie come in and develop. You watch Kendall Pollard and Kyle Davis. You watch those guys come in as freshmen. You guys watch them develop. Yes. They added Charles Cook and some other pieces, but like they were a part of that journey as well. You were a part of their journey. So when you saw what they went through on the floor, when you saw them experience the hardships and then be able to overcome and win the A-10 and make that journey through the NCAA tournament, you were at one with them. Even if this roster gets to the tournament, wins a tournament game, you're going to be excited. It's March Madness, but the vibe is still off. There's just something missing. And that's all of college sports. I'm localizing it to Dayton, yes, but you guys know I'm right. I'm not hating. I'm hating on college basketball as a whole right now because I think that's the unfortunate part. I don't get excited about recruiting anymore. I don't really care about high school recruiting. And it's not that I don't, I'm happy for the high schoolers who do get recruited. I'm hearing the horror stories right now of just how difficult it is for these kids to get recruited because a lot of colleges have turned their attention 100% towards the transfer portal. Do I want to draft guys coming out of high school and waste a lot of time developing them that they're just going to end up the second that they taste any kind of, success, they're just going to bounce anyways? Or look at the transfer portal, seasoned veteran players or experienced players that the learning curve isn't as drastic and you can get them in there and hit the ground running. I like Anthony Grant. To Anthony Grant's credit, I think he's done a good job of emphasizing the portal, but I'm constantly seeing UD in the mix going after some of the top high school prospects out there as well. That's not the case for a lot of schools. So I do think that Anthony Grant trying to find that balance, and I think that could, that's not that I think it could work. We know it could work, but for it to work, you have to hopefully have the trust of those players to stick it out with the program the whole way through. And that's just something that college as a whole is really struggling with at this point. But yeah, whenever I saw that schedule and I saw that Dayton, that first exhibition game with Penn State is in October. They have 2 exhibition games in October as far as that's concerned because they're going to end up having Bowling Green right after that. So Penn State on, what is that, the 19th? Man, my old eyes, apparently. I'm 35 years old. I can't even see. And then on the 27th, they'll have Bowling Green in an exhibition game as well. All of those at UD Arena. And then Canisius and UMBC with the season openers in early November as far as that goes. But yeah, I love the non-conference schedule. See? I don't hate on everything. I'm just saying I like that non-conference schedule. That sets you like you're, the Georgetowns. And by the way, those are bigger programs and they're beatable bigger programs, and that's key. And that's going to look good on the resume, of course. You're going to have having Florida State come here is big time. Like, that's a big opportunity. And what I like about that is that's one of the final non-conference games before you go into A-10 play. So you get a big win against Florida State. You cap off, you're gonna have Liberty right after that, but you cap off your non-conference and with the memorable potential win over Florida State as you head into A-10 play. I think that's a massive opportunity for the Flyers when it's all said and done. All right, I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show, Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM. The Cincinnati Reds will be in action coming up later on tonight. I want to talk a little Cincinnati Reds as there's more to dive into. When can we expect to see Nick Lodolo return? We'll talk about that. We'll take a look at the standings across Major League Baseball. We'll get into all of that when we come back. The Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio.